think you got to be able to be real with yourself.
Yeah.
To understand what the truth is. It doesn't mean you're going to tell, it doesn't mean you're going to tell Nate or someone else what that is. But I think, then you know your limits, and you can really, I think, be honest with yourself about whatever the thing is that you're doing. And I think that that's important. And I don't think a lot of people are.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back, Championship Leadership Podcast. We got Anthony Milewski with us from the States originally, but across the pond over just outside of London, I think. So how you doing?
Great. Thanks a lot for having me this morning. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. What's Championship Leadership's the name of the podcast. What comes to mind for you when you hear championship leadership? What's that mean to you?
You know, I think when I think about leadership, I think about leading by example. And so when I think about, great leaders, sometimes you meet a camp leader that's do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
And then I think there are those leaders who they put the time in, the hard work in, whether that's in sports, in business, in life. And so for me, championship leadership is really about being a leader who leads by example. So that's kind of how I think about leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk a lot, like, I think the days of do as I say, not as I do, or, my way or the highway type I feel like have kind of come and gone, right? Like, I don't know.
I think especially in this world of transparency where, maybe the exception to that would be at a really large corporation where, see what's happening with Disney, people can hide with layers of management and leadership. But I think even there, people ultimately, whether it's through Zoom or whether it's walking across the hallway or social events, I think it's just a more transparent world than, even 20 years ago, where you had a phone call if you were in the LA office sitting in New York or whatever, and maybe you didn't see it quite as much.
Yeah, true. I mean, there's definitely time and a place for that, right? Like where, hey, like we need to, there's a time where if I tell you to do something, that there's a reason behind it, and there's a time to execute and not question. We got to move, and there's got to be some trust there. But at the same time, there's, I think we've changed, right? Like, the more people understand why they're doing things too, the more bought in they can be to behind the big picture as well, right? So,
but it shouldn't be a mistaken for hard work.
Yeah, right.
It's one thing if you have a question and you want to talk about it. But ultimately, that's not a replacement for, okay, you're 24, it's your first job. You're not going to do everything that the boss is doing, right? Like you got to learn how to do it. And I think something like if I was talking with someone who was starting their career and we were kind of talking about things, I would say, learn everything, kind of the more you know about whatever it is you're doing, whether that's law or finance or PR, whatever that management, whatever that is, I think the more valuable you are, and it helps you probably realize what you don't know as well.
Yeah.
And as you move your way up through those managerial positions and ultimately, potentially all the way up to the CEO and chairman roles, I think you become much more valuable the more you actually know. And I think an interesting example of this is Chick-fil-A, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of examples of this, but Chick-fil-A, for instance, I was reading, you have to work at a Chick-fil-A for a couple of years. You have to sit there in the driveway. And I think this is just a great analogy. You got to sit there and you got to take the order and you got to wear them. And so I think that's a really kind of a great example of, hey, you might ultimately manage or own one of these things, but you're going to know how to make the burger, right?
Yeah.
And I think whether that's a Chick-fil-A or whether that's an investment bank or whether that's Coca-Cola, I think really understanding as much about the different businesses as you can and as practical is important. And then later on, as you move up that leadership structure, I think you get more respect because I think there's some feeling that, okay, this individual actually Maybe they know what I'm going through. Maybe they know what I'm thinking about or dealing with.
Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah. Cause you could, yeah, you can't own a Chick-fil-A unless you work there. Right.
I don't.
Um,
I think that that's. I think I was
I've
reading
heard that
about it. Yeah,
recently as
you have
well.
to work there for
Yeah.
multiple years. I don't think you
Yeah.
can just
Yeah.
turn up and franchise one.
Which is a great model for sure. Just
Yeah, I
to,
read there's a pizza place out there. Right? I was reading. I was kind of in the same article. They're talking about you had to go deliver pizzas, in
uh-huh.
order to before you could become a franchise owner. And
Yeah,
so,
that makes
I mean,
sense.
these are kind of extreme examples, but just in terms of leadership, um, I think it's just a great way of thinking about it. And by the way, some of the failings, I think, if you look at really large corporations in America, is that sometimes, and you got to think about, there's some of these businesses have enormous 20, 40, 60, 100,000 employees, right?
Yeah.
And I think in this era of some of these businesses getting so big, sometimes the failure of leadership can be that they're so disconnected
Right.
from, because, and that's kind of the nature of that structure, and it's hard to kind of understand how you figure that out. But you can kind of see some both extremes there. It takes 30 years to move through that corporate structure. You get there in your 60s, and maybe you're disconnected from what it was like to be 24.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about yourself and maybe the journey and path you've been on for the listener, and how that's kind of taken you to where you are at today and what it is that you're up to today.
Yeah. So, I mean, funny enough, I went to law school, which, I didn't really ever practice law for more than just a minute. I was at
Okay.
a firm in Europe, out of New York called Skadden Arps, but then really I was at a hedge fund. And then after the hedge fund, I was at a private equity firm. I was a partner. And, I always, I want to step back for a second. When I think about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs, and I'm not a tech investor, so I can't speak to tech specifically, but for a lot of the other stuff, the real stuff, the nuts and bolts, the commodities stuff that you touch and feel, a lot of times the best entrepreneurs are in their late 40s and early 50s who are solving a problem that they've been thinking about their entire career. And those are some of my
Yeah.
favorite entrepreneurs to back
Yeah.
or invest with. And so, at the private equity firm, we started to think about where the world was going with electrification and what that was going to look like. And, partnered up and spun out of that private equity firm to focus on, you know, basic materials that relate to kind of the reinvention of the electricity grid and electric vehicles, in a way that we at the time wanted to reimagine it. So that's copper, nickel, cobalt. And if you're a listener or if you're watching this, look around the room that you're in and think about this. Almost everything you see is either mined or grown. This is like the basic foundation of kind of modern life. Like, you cannot drive to work this morning without a mine. Can't do it.
Yeah.
There's copper, there's nickel, there's probably petroleum products in there from oil. So
Right.
that was kind of where I'd spent my whole career and spun out. And what I wanted to focus on is, okay, we've been heavily for 100 years now used hydrocarbons as our source of energy. And, it's hard to know for sure, but definitely that's caused some problems. And now we're transitioning to an era of higher awareness and really looking at, okay, how can we do this in a healthier, more sustainable way? And there's a bunch of things, whether that's nuclear power, whether that's solar, whether that's just consuming less, but all of those things really require a certain type of basic material, copper, for instance. And so I've really spent my career focused on creating companies, investing in entrepreneurs, and building companies that I'm involved in order to kind of help with this notion of transitioning to a more sustainable kind of future, right?
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing about natural resources is, everyone consumes them. Your iPhone, everything we're doing right now is using natural resources, but no one wants a mine built in their
Yeah.
backyard.
For sure.
And in fact, people don't realize this has caused a really huge problem for America. So, almost no mines have been commissioned in America now for decades.
Yeah.
There are mines, but a lot of them have already been built or with great struggle have been commissioned. And
Yeah.
so what that has meant is these natural resources, which are so critical to your life, every person's life in America,
Yeah.
uh, they're mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Uh-huh.
They're coming from South America. They're coming from China, rare earths. They're coming from Russia. I hate to say it. They're still coming. So
Yeah.
they're coming from all these places. And, this really interesting thing happened about 10 years ago. So people, when we go to China all the time, people don't understand China. They don't realize that the Chinese government has a constituency just like America. And
Yeah.
they're very responsive to their people in their own way. And what they realized was that people are getting really sick of the pollution in a lot of these major cities. And so China completely revamped its policy, shifted towards nuclear energy, and realized that electrification had huge benefits because then the automobiles weren't sending out all this kind of crap inside of the cities. And so the government realized that, and they don't think in 1 or 2 years, they think in 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
They went out into Africa in particular, but other places, and they invested in lithium mines,
Yep.
nickel mines, copper, cobalt. And now I would argue that they probably just about control the global supply chain for those metals, which have a big impact on our life. Like, even if you say, "Oh, I don't believe in electric vehicles," fine, I don't mind that. But guess how your power is transmitted?
Yeah.
Copper wire.
Right.
That's how your iPhone. So this is a really interesting thing that's sort of happened that I would say almost no one in the States, really thinks about or realizes. And it's in large part because our political cycle is so short focused.
Yeah.
It's really fighting about dumb stuff on both sides, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's kind of allowed this huge opening for other countries to move ahead doing nothing wrong. Like, China's done nothing wrong. They literally have just invested their money into these mines, which America could do, and we just haven't. But it's a point about leadership, actually.
Yeah.
Because there's a leadership podcast.
Right.
And there's different kinds of leadership. We're talking about an individual leading a company, a father, mother leading a family. Well, there's something about global leadership as well.
Yeah.
And I think, what's interesting in this particular example is China has taken a global leadership role in transitioning to greener energies. And, it's up to the States and Canada and Europe to kind of respond, I think, and we really haven't. So it's just an interesting side note, because it's also a form of leadership, just, on a policy and government level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Well, who are some of the championship leaders or coaches, mentors that maybe you've had in your life, and always more so about, like, what are some of the characteristics from those individuals that have impacted you that really stand out, when it comes to leadership, and that maybe you've taken to help mold who you are as a leader?
I think that, and I can only speak for myself, but really childhood sports, in all the different forms, right? Because you're working on a team. I can think of high school baseball coaches and football coaches, and even, like, it sounds funny, but I can even think about coaches in Little League. I have this memory.
Yeah, totally.
It's really silly, but it was in minors. We called them minors, and I was playing outfield, and I got really bored, and I sat down. I think I was probably 9 years old.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember my kids.
I just was bored, and I was a kid, and I sat down.
Yeah.
And I remember, the coach came over, and he's like, "Look, we're a team. You can't sit down. Sometimes things are boring." And it sounds so silly, but I kind of recall that lesson, and I think a lot of the benefits of those childhood sports, winning, losing, and just those moments being on a team, really had a great impact on all aspects of how I think about leadership now, and team building, and helping the person that's sitting down in the outfield understand why they're not supposed to, and the opposite, of course, is helping the kid who's really good understand why they shouldn't be a jerk to the guy.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of lessons and dynamics in those sports that I think were really helpful.
Yeah, I love it. What did you play sports throughout your childhood?
Yeah, I played. I mean, like my true love was fly fishing
Okay.
and skiing and that sort of stuff. But I played baseball and football all the way through.
You play in college as well?
I played 1 year at BYU. I played football for a
Oh,
year,
okay.
and
You play football there?
I played football. What I realized is
How old are you?
it wasn't going to work out.
Yeah.
So
How old are you?
I'm 42.
Okay. I had a business partner, Satema Nali. Was he around then? He's a little,
I don't think so.
he's about 4 years older than you. He
I
played at
was there in
BYU.
98, 99. Which is
Okay.
that
Yeah.
was
You
only
just,
one season.
I think you probably just missed each other. But anyway, that's cool. What's the vision for you then? Yeah, I think championship leaders have incredible vision, and oftentimes one that most others can't see or maybe even thinks crazy, but they have the courage to take action on that too. What's the vision for you and what you're looking to do, and more so like what's the impact that you're looking to make?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we've gotten really involved in the last few years are carbon credits. And carbon credits are not the be all end all. It's not the final solution. But what it does do is between now and this transition period of 20 or 30 years, it allows for the protection of vast ecosystems. So then there's a ton of nuance, but the upshot is if these forest lands are in danger, they're going to be cut down, burned, whatever is going to happen to them, or that's already happened, they're going to reforest them. You can invest in them, protect them, and then write a carbon credit to offset an emission for a company. And there's all kinds of criticism about it, but I always it kind of comes down to one point for me, which is, okay, what's worse, like the forest existing and you not liking the carbon credit, or
Yeah.
you just the forest being gone? And so, for me, I think that especially in the last maybe 10, I mean, I've always felt strongly about these wild places. And I really think that one of the great gifts that we can give our kids and grandkids and future generations is just preserving them and helping them to exist so that they can enjoy them too, whether that's fishing or hiking. And so I think, through the carbon credit program, we've been involved in helping to preserve certain places. And I think that's really interesting. The other thing that I've been really involved in is I started a website called the Oregon Group with some of my business partners. And what we've done is kind of started to share our views about commodities and other macro events in a format that's more geared towards retail investors,
Okay.
or just average people as opposed to, sort of sophisticated professional investors. So I think those are the two things looking forward that I enjoy, but yeah.
Yeah. Fly fishing. Well, obviously you grew up in Washington in a small town where you probably were able to do a lot of that. It definitely wasn't something that really anyone did where I grew up necessarily. So I've never personally fly fished, but is there a lot of that out in the UK to do?
There in the UK there definitely is, but in Europe in general, there's really great Atlantic salmon fishing in the north.
Okay.
In the UK, it's much more formal. Like kind of people almost like own the river, and you have to wear things, and you can only cast upstream.
Oh,
But
really?
for me, the the fishing in Colorado and Oregon and
Yeah.
Washington, Alaska is really where I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's something pretty spectacular to have a fly that looks like a grasshopper, and you cast it out there and watch the fish come up and rise. And so it's and
Awesome.
once again, I think there's a certain rhythm to it. You're in nature and you're kind of amongst the trees and the water, and it's relaxing.
You're looking over your shoulder and make sure you don't get eaten by a grizzly bear every now and then. And
No, I've not had that problem.
no, I do some ultra running, and I was doing 100-mile run in Alaska on the old Denali Highway a couple of years ago, and I was kind of constantly just looking around, making sure there was no bears coming, because I was like, well, if there's a bear coming, I'm dead, because I'm not going to be able to get away from this thing. But
What's the joke? The 200s in the woods, and there's a bear around the corner, big grizzly bear, and the one guy kind of bends over, starts tying up his shoes. He says, you can't outrun that bear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I can outrun you.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't see any bears, by the way, but yeah.
I go to Alaska about once a year, and
Yeah.
we see bears every year. But during that peak salmon season in the summers, they're really busy eating. As long as you don't kind of step between a cub and a mom or something,
Sure.
or startle a bear. I mean, you need to go into the bush, kind of make it sound, but it's pretty safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, common sense will get you a long way.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, I like to ask this question. What's like a critical moment for you in your life, kind of that fork in the road where you made the decision that you have, which has you here where you are today, but had you chose differently, you could be in a very different place. I think there's power for people to hear that, how others have chosen those moments when they're kind of sitting in that moment themselves. Is there a moment you could share with the listener?
Yeah, I would say it's a couple of times. And I think, like when I was starting my first job, they said, look, you can start in New York or, in the States, or by the way, there was a big bull market on, you can go to Europe and work in Europe, and ultimately ended up working in Russia for a while. And I can think of another moment where there was an opportunity to leave a firm where I was getting paid really well, and to go start a company. And I think, it all kind of works out in the end if you're working hard. And I think you don't most of the time regret those risks, even if they don't work out.
Yeah.
Because it makes life interesting.
Right.
And if you always play it safe, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think a lot of the big rewards come from taking those risks in your career, going to the startup, trying your own company, moving when maybe you shouldn't, because I think that those are really kind of growth moments. And oftentimes we're bored and we're rolled into this kind of just day to day. But when you take that risk, all of a sudden you realize, oh man, I got to work harder. I've got to focus. I've got to do it. And I think it kind of re-engages you into your career and whatever that means.
Yeah.
And I think that can be rewarding. Just one, because you're re-engaged, but two, life's short, and why not try something new?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's some great advice. Right. And it always seems to work itself out no matter what. And so maybe just to really choose that path that maybe you really feel called to go, but oftentimes maybe we don't, just because of whatever fear or something, right? Like, or really wanting to know what's going to happen before it does. And it's just obviously not reality, but go with your gut, I guess. Right. So follow the path that you feel called to follow. So as we kind of start to wrap it up a little bit, like what would be one or two principles maybe that you live by, or pieces of advice for the listener that if they could implement today would help move their life forward today? What might that be?
I think the first one is just make time for yourself. And I think that more specifically for your health.
Yeah.
And so I think you just, maybe you can't do every day, but whether that's going for a run or lifting weights or doing yoga or meditating, we all waste 30 minutes a day. We just do.
Oh yeah.
And instead of wasting it, I think if you just, make time for yourself and your health, I can tell you that, you always feel better. I think relative to your own situation, whatever that means, if you can be in some kind of physical shape. I think that's one thing. And I think the other thing, one of the things I see among a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders and people that I looked up to is, I think you got to be able to be real with yourself.
Yeah.
To understand what the truth is. It doesn't mean you're going to tell. It doesn't mean you're going to tell Nate or someone else what that is. But I think, then your limits, and you can really, I think, be honest with yourself about whatever the thing is that you're doing. And I think that that's important. And I don't think a lot of people are. Yeah.
Right. How long do you? So you're in the UK from the States. You think you're gonna stay there long term, or ever thoughts of coming back?
Well, I mean, I come to the States all the
stateside?
time,
Yeah.
just, constantly. But yeah, I mean, it's
This is kind of your home there now.
I have a place in Washington, so I'm always kind of everywhere. So
Yeah,
I don't mind.
you
I
got
don't
it.
mind moving around a bit.
Right. Absolutely. What would be, I don't know if you're active social media or what, but if the listener wanted to, follow along with your journey a little bit and what it is that you're up to and find out more about what you got going on, is there a main spot
Yeah,
that we can
Twitter's
send
the
them?
best place. I mean, I'm on
Twitter.
Instagram, but
What do you think of Twitter recently? Twitter obviously been in the news quite a bit this past year. But have you always been a part of Twitter?
for a really long time, I think it's such a great platform for having like a procured flow of information. So I really like Twitter.
Yeah.
LinkedIn I find much more challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm on there, but I don't
Yeah.
find it as useful. And then Instagram, I like Instagram. I always post pictures of the outdoors and things, but I don't find it quite the same as Twitter. So for a specific thing, which is reading articles about stuff and following individuals and what they're posting, I find it to be fantastic.
Yeah. What's your Twitter handle?
That's a great question. I think let me look. I'll just look right now. I think it's just AM.
Twitter's one of the platforms that I just have never taken time to get, but I've had a lot of friends like you say the same thing. Yeah.
So you're not on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter, but no, I'm not on Twitter really. I don't go to Twitter hardly ever.
I just find it so, I mean, because you create what you want to, I find, and you see a lot of interesting articles about things that are interesting to you, that from sources. So I don't know, I find it to be fantastic for a specific type of news. I mean, I don't like post about what I'm eating or something, and I think that's kind of boring, but just specifically for information, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. What's your Twitter handle?
It's my first initial, and then _Milewski, my last name.
Okay. Yeah, easy. All right, cool. Well, yeah, we'll definitely get that linked up, and in case anyone wants to follow you there. But appreciate you taking the time today to be a part of the show here.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you're listening now, obviously you are, and stay right here if you want some more incredible conversations with people just like Anthony that to learn from and to help you on your journey. Stay right here for the next episode. Thank you so much, Anthony, for being here today.
Thank you.